Hearing Max be frustrated over the team radio is nothing new. In fact, I think he might be the only driver on the grid to have multiple YouTube compilations of his various radio outbursts. Now, for the most part, I've always accepted that that is just part of his natural character, but in Hungary, it definitely felt different. The radio outbursts and also some of the post-race interviews that he did as well, to me, it went beyond just criticizing the team and a lot more like he was starting to lose trust in them. In terms of his specific complaints in Hungary with the strategy, what's ironic is that it was even mentioned in the commentary that pretty much every single driver during that race was complaining about their strategy, and it's down to the unique challenges of a high-deck circuit where tyre life and performance can fluctuate so much. And now, whilst I agree with Max that Red Bull didn't have the best strategy and maybe overestimated the delta that a new tyre would give them around a track that's very difficult to overtake on, going back and analysing the race, it also wasn't the worst strategy with the circumstances that were thrown at them. Coming into the race, Mercedes struggled in the warmer temperatures to preserve their tyres, and so that is why they had to run 2 new sets of the hard tyres, whilst Red Bull with both of their drivers were able to run 2 new sets of the medium tyres, and for Checo it worked out as he was able to overtake George. When Lewis undercut Max at the start, yes, it gave him track position, but the price you always pay for that is that subsequent pit stops are going to happen earlier than you'd want them to happen, and it also means that you're going to be vulnerable on much older tyres at the end of the race. In fact, before Lewis and Max collided, Lewis came on the radio and himself complained about his strategy, saying that they stopped too early in the race, and also complained that he won't be able to hold off Max and Charles behind him on their medium tyres. The reason why Max then also got jumped again by Leclerc during the middle stint is because Leclerc did an abnormally short stint on the hard tyre of just 17 laps. Ferrari figured out that their best chance was to also get track position and potentially just try to hold on to it. But just as I said with Lewis, the price Leclerc paid for having to go so long on the mediums is that not only did Max catch up to him very quickly, but by the end of the race he was lapping slower than Lewis because his mediums had fallen off. When Max came out of the pits on lap 49 with the tyres that were 9 laps younger than Leclerc and Hamilton, he was just under 6 seconds behind Leclerc, who in turn was just over 1 second behind Hamilton. It took him just 3 laps to catch up to the back of Leclerc before overtaking him, and with Lewis not too far ahead, Max had 13 laps to overtake him with a faster car and softer compound. Although Lewis put up a good defense and it was a fun fight to watch, to me it was inevitable that Max would eventually get through him, but on lap 63, they ended up colliding. In Hungary, the Red Bull was the second best car, and so the maximum result for Max would have been a P3. Whilst I get that his job was made harder as he had to overtake his way to the podium, before his collision with Lewis, he was basically on his way to the best result possible anyway. Looking at it after the race, whilst I get that frustration from Max as a driver seeing 2 cars undercut him, looking at it from the outside, I don't think that Max's anger was proportional to how bad his strategy actually was. And now, we all heard Max's frustration over the team radio, and there was plenty that wasn't broadcasted as well. Racefans.net uploaded a full transcript which I have read on their website, so if you're interested to read everything that was said both during and also after the race word for word, then definitely follow the link in the description. I have seen Max swear and go crazy over the team radio when something has gone wrong before, but in Hungary it got to the point where Max completely lost his head. Sometimes it's good to drive angry because if it's a motivated angry, then it can actually make you drive better. But what Max was going through losing his head was a detrimental angry. It very clearly started to affect his driving, and I think it was a major contributor to his crash with Lewis. In terms of the crash, I actually didn't mind that it was deemed as just a racing incident because I don't think that every single crash has to be someone's fault. However, I do think that Max shares more of the blame. To me, the lunge was just born out of frustration, and that was evidenced by the fact that he locked up both of his front tyres in desperation, which meant that he was out of control going straight during a right-hander. And now, it's common to see cars on the inside start to open up their steering during a corner to allow the car to wash out wide and squeeze off the car on the outside. Turn 2 in Hungary is the classic corner for this, and we saw Max do it to Lewis on lap 1 and Lewis do it to Max on lap 62. Even in that situation, however, the car on the inside still has to turn into the corner eventually. They just don't turn as much as they need to because they're intentionally trying to make the corner wider. Even though Lewis, I'm sure, expected to be ran wide by Max, he also expected for Max to start turning into the corner. That is why you can see that just before Max's front tyres lock up, Lewis's yellow gloves pop up as he starts to anticipate turning for the right-hander. Instead, just as Lewis starts to turn, Max completely locks up both of his front tyres, braking way too late going into the corner, and at that point, Max is out of control almost like a train on tracks, going straight during a right-hander. This was just a bad day in the office for Red Bull and also for Max on the driving side. But I think it would be naive to start jumping on Max off the back of one bad race and to make it out to be a bigger issue than it is. Or what I did take away from it, however, is the fact that this weekend showed clear cracks starting to form in the Max and Red Bull partnership. After the race, whilst he obviously didn't call anyone out by name, he was very critical of the strategy, he was very vocal about the decline in performance and specifically the balance of the car, which we heard during the race, and more than anything else, he hinted at people within the organization of being complacent at Red Bull's recent struggle. It's important to remember that one of the reasons why Max has been so dominant over the last few years is because, as I've said on multiple videos, Red Bull as an organization have been the best in class and have done everything in their power to put Max in the best car, the most comfortable position mentally, and to make sure that they take as much pressure off his shoulders so that he doesn't have to worry or question their strategy like we've seen other drivers have to do. The high standards that Max has along with his raw talent is what makes him the ruthless champion that he is. But it's also important to remember to not bite off the hand that feeds you. The Formula 1 grid was always going to converge eventually, and whilst I think that we're all surprised at just how rapidly McLaren have been able to do it in 2024, it means that the competition for Max was always going to get closer, and the margin of error for Red Bull was always going to get narrower. Perfection under these circumstances is always going to be difficult when you don't have a clear car advantage to ease the pressure off. I mean, we have seen McLaren make strategical errors almost every single race, despite having the best car. There is an emotional balancing act that Max as a champion and team leader is going to have to do. On one hand, you can't ever take a championship for granted or allow the standards of your team to drop, but on the other hand, you also need to show a level of maturity and leadership in difficult moments, because when things go wrong, over 800 people that work for Red Bull are looking at you to be their leader. I don't think that losing his head over the radio the way that he did, which then had a part to play in his crash with Lewis, and also then choosing to out the team post-race, is a sign of good leadership in what really has been only the first actual bad race for Red Bull. I think the summer break has come at the right time for both Max and also Red Bull. Their Hungary update, although it was track-specific, didn't deliver the performance that they expected, and along with McLaren getting more comfortable with the pressure that comes with fighting for wins, it means that Red Bull are going to have more difficult races like Hungary. It's important to also have a sense of perspective and not to overreact, because Red Bull are still the clear favourites for both the drivers and also the Constructors' Championship. McLaren have made it abundantly clear that the Drivers' Championship isn't their priority with Lando, and the only reason that there's any uncertainty in the Constructors' Championship is because Checo has underperformed, which the team is actively trying to sort out with a potential mid-season driver swap. Even though I think that there will be plenty of other tracks in the remainder of the season, like Spa this weekend where Red Bull could get back to having the best car on the grid, in Hungary specifically their car problems were definitely worrying, because of what it means going forward as to whether they'll be able to get on top of their balance issues, which was at the heart of Max's frustration. What we saw in Hungary was the first visible signs of Max losing faith in Red Bull and doubt starting to creep into his mind. Doubt over whether the team can get back on top of their car, doubt over some of the people within the organization, and real doubts for the very first time over whether Max will still be there in years to come. At the beginning of the season, despite all of the problems at Red Bull with the political tension, the loss of Adrian Newey, and then also the unknown over the 2026 engine program, because they were still dominating with Max easily winning every single race and even Checo backing him up on the podium, that success was papering over the cracks. The rumors of Max going to Mercedes were always going to persist, especially with how public Toto has made his chase for Max. Whilst at the beginning of the season, there wasn't a performance reason for Max to switch, and even in Hungary, let's not forget, Red Bull still had a faster car. As these cracks between Max and Red Bull start to become public, and as Mercedes also start to become more competitive, it makes a potential move in the future now make a lot more sense. It all depends on where the line is for Max in terms of tolerance, and at what point he will cross over from being tempted to leave Red Bull to actually making it happen with Mercedes. Although people have talked about 25 and never say never, I guess, Max himself wanted to reassure the team and get rid of any speculation and confirmed that he will stay at Red Bull next season. 26, however, is a lot more interesting. We still don't know what's going to happen with the whole Antonelli situation, but at least with George, his contract runs out at the end of 2025, so contractually, Mercedes will have a seat available for 2026. I don't think Max is close yet to wanting to leave Red Bull at the moment, but Hungary to me was the first real time that something felt different about his demeanor towards the team, and the way he was talking as if he's losing faith in their ability to turn it around already. Success and a championship-capable car I think will allow Max to tolerate almost any nonsense that happens behind the scenes, but when the success stops with the other teams putting more and more pressure on him, and if Red Bull fail to give him a championship-level car next season, to me, there becomes an almost overwhelming argument for why Max could and probably will leave Red Bull. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.